It's like if you're trying to plan a trip somewhere, like knowing what your end goal is tells you if you need to pack like a snowboard or a surfboard. But if you're preparing for all eventualities without knowing where you're going, you're just never going to leave the house in the first place because you're like, oh, do I need a surfboard and a snowboard and hiking boots and this and that and that? So really by kind of having that outcome mindset, you can kind of work backward and see what skills you eventually need to grab along the way. And I think as a company supporting that so that it supports both the individual as well as what the company gets out of it is a win-win for both. And so, cross-functional projects, having that emphasis on adaptability over necessarily specific skills is kind of a nice way to go.
Good morning, y'all, and welcome to the Pample Pod. I'll be your host today, Jonathan.
And this is Michael.
And this is Eugene.
Awesome. So let's dive right into the big question. So this is a segment where we discuss a difficult conceptual question. So what I wanted to talk about today was the idea of stagnating in your career. So the overall question I'd like to ask is, how do we keep from stagnating in our careers? And what do we really mean by that? So that's a good starting point, I think.
Yeah, that's a good one, especially like putting some definition a little bit to what that stagnation means. I think I kind of see it as a lack of growth, essentially, at one point in someone's career. Maybe once you are, call it comfortable, but never challenged. I think that's kind of the key part there as to what leads to that stagnation. Kind of think of it like being on autopilot in a way. If you're doing things without questioning, that could be like another way to maybe phrase it or define it. And to me, it's, I guess, kind of a result of like when you say, what does it mean to be stagnating? It's maybe an artifact of not being focused on the big picture so much and maybe overemphasizing skill, mastery of skill specifically, over kind of keeping in mind what your goals are, I think.
I think I'm aligned with your definition of stagnation, Michael. It's definitely having to do something with kind of having that learning plateau, not having growth anymore. You're not learning or refining skills or just gathering new knowledge as an individual. And I do think, the fundamental issue, the core issue why that tends to happen for some folks is that they just lose that critical pressure to feel like they need to improve themselves. So, there is that thing that people talk about, the Dunning-Kruger effect, where I think that's kind of in play here with stagnation, where I think sometimes if you feel like you know everything that there is to know about something, then you kind of you couldn't be bothered to go out of your way to try to prove yourself wrong. And that because it also feels comfortable as well. Like you feel like you're at the top of the mountain, so to speak. You've reached your final destination and, you don't need to work to have to improve yourself anymore. You feel like you reached a point where you can just stop. But in a way that kind of helps, that does make you kind of become out of touch with what's going on around you.
I think you mentioned the Dunning-Kruger effect and sort of like how people can stagnate when they know very little, but I think it also can be a problem when someone knows a lot or they're really an expert at the subject, or maybe they've been performing a certain role for 20 years and they're a master at the skills that they need for their role. Is it still possible to stagnate in that case? Or how does that look differently from someone who's just getting started and then kind of hits a place where they don't feel like they need to learn anymore?
I think it's a good take on it because I tend to agree with you. It's like if you find a niche, for example, of whatever form it may take. It could be a specific skill set. You might be a PhD, for example, with that one goal you've been working towards. But I still think you can stagnate in that situation because it's. I think as humans we kind of love predictability, and there's something comforting about mastering a skill and wanting to stick with that one skill. But finding a niche in and of itself is not bad, just to be clear. But it's if you evolve with it, I think then it's okay, you're good. Otherwise, I kind of like to think about, it's like if you specialize in VHS players, right? And like, you're really good at it, but the world moved on and, you would probably find yourself in a sort of a stagnant situation, maybe not by skill, but by lack of demand or some other.
Yeah, so that would take more of a proactive approach where you're thinking about like other technologies that are coming out and then like taking what you know and transitioning it to a new field.
Yeah, exactly. And most likely like, when I say goal-oriented, for example, like, what led you into, say, being an expert for VHS, just to say on that example, it's most likely not just the VHS itself. It was probably something beyond that you like to be useful and repair things, or you have a passion for just audiovisual techniques and industry and players. But I I don't know that it would be so specific as to be like that one piece of technology, for example, which sounds silly as an example, but when you think of like, was it Blu-ray versus DVD and other platforms like that through time where you've had competing technologies to try and take a market and one succeed, but one fails, it usually was a bit of a result for whomever failed, that lack of adaptability in it being able to switch back to whichever technology the world ended up demanding. And so maybe that's the next step after stagnation is, maybe failure to capture business and then, going out of business. But there was that stagnation step before that, even though you had a specific skill too.
Yeah. I think I'm on the same page with you, Michael, especially when you say that it's okay to have a niche. I think it is easy to say that finding a niche is similar to being stagnant, which I don't think that is the case, like you're saying. I think a good way to kind of abstract what you're saying with the VHS and kind of abstracting this a bit more is it's good to, I mean, even in a business, people do recommend a business to specialize in something. That's how you can gather clients, because clients can then know what you're good at and they come to you for services and stuff like that. So you can be good at something at a niche, but I think so that's like having a single or a handful of skills, but being able to identify a wide range of applications in which that skill could be used I think that's kind of the magic that you need to create there in a company. So like what you're saying, Michael, where it's not that you're not really good with VHSs, but you can do other things beyond just the physical hardware, whether it's something in the audiovisual creative industry or something with Blu-ray or DVDs or something. But it's okay to be known for something, that there's nothing wrong with that. But the problem, I think, could be that if you do, as that individual with that skill set, kind of trap yourself, be like, okay, this is what I'm known for, so this is all I will do. It feels comfortable. I'm just kind of building these walls around myself. And I don't want to make myself uncomfortable by doing something that's outside of that immediate area of comfort.
Yeah.
I do think that when it comes to dealing with stagnation, that really does kind of come to play with that human need for comfort, trying to just doing something that you know and understand.
Yeah, there's something to be said about that sort of mistaking comfort for progress, because once you reach that niche, it might feel good to be there. Maybe you become more efficient because, you have the one thing you're focusing on and you can sort of streamline your processes and so on, as corporate as that sounds. But the thing is, things rarely stay static through time too. So while, all the conditions might be right, such that niche or whatever you're working on is very fruitful at the moment, it's highly unlikely that it stays like that forever. And, maybe it's on the scale of a year if it's a fad, or maybe it's a decade or a couple decades if it's a more longer lasting trend. But eventually, at some point, sooner or later, the conditions are going to change. And I think that's when someone might be faced with that feeling of stagnation. Essentially, your environment is changing. And if you sort of fail to listen to that and anticipate that change, you might start having that feeling of stagnation. If you find yourself sort of defending whatever your niche is against an opposing reality of where, customers might be going or vendors or other, then you might be a bit in denial and have higher odds of finding yourself stagnating.
And that's a tricky position to be in, because you've invested so much time and effort and skill building into a specific avenue, but then something new comes out and people that are selling that product probably have their own specialization in that. So you can't compete directly.
Yeah, exactly. It's a tricky balance because, like you said, you have that choice of either you drop what you were doing and you say adapt to what the new market trend,
and you'll be behind if you do that.
Or you can, in some cases, perhaps like stay creative and you stay within your niche, but you adapt to a different clientele, because there might be people who still want XYZ product you're doing, but that client profile might have changed. You maybe had a broader population, and there's a ton of like oldies or older products coming back, right? If you think of like very hipster trends, for example. And so those are
like vinyl records.
Yeah, exactly, right? So whoever's stuck with vinyls is probably like, that paid off.
They called me a fool.
Exactly. But, they cater to a very different audience now, which is, I wouldn't quite necessarily call it a commodity at one point, but eventually, there was a point where vinyl records were more sort of general population, whereas now it's more of a pristine collector's item that you get. And so it's maybe not quite a luxury product, but it's, somewhere in between where it has some precedence to have a collection of vinyls and stuff. And so, they've stuck to the same physical product, but they've adapted at least on the market side of things, which is kind of interesting. So more so to bounce back off what you're saying and saying like, sometimes it means actually leaving the product behind or that process, but sometimes it might just be like adapting your messaging around it or who you sell to or sort of the positioning you have with that thing.
Yeah, and I guess the way you position yourself for success is continually looking for who your clients might be, and also keeping in touch with the field at large, like what's showing up at technical conferences, what are other people working on, what's the research saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where the comfort part is kind of dangerous, because once you get in that comfort zone, you might be tempted to not be in listening mode as much. And I think that's where the problems might start too. You know, I think no one intentionally wants to go into like stagnation mode,
Right.
but I think it's when you hit that comfort, you get a bit of maybe a complacency of sorts. And that's when you're not perhaps as observant of the changing landscape.
I know we've talked a little bit about what kind of individual professionals can do to reverse their complacency, but how does the structure of a business or kind of corporate culture also impact how likely people are to stagnate?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a big one to me, and it's a big one for Pample as well, is encouraging cross-functional projects across disciplines. That forces you out of your comfort zone. Right? I talked about comfort, and I think that's really what the goal is with implementing those as well. You know, that is a big way to do it. I think also in general, let's say you don't have cross-functional projects to offer, just rewarding problem solving and adaptability over like skilled mastery, I think would be a good way to process as well. You know, overemphasis on skill can be dangerous, both at the company level and the individual level. And you know, maybe just to go back to the individuals for a quick second, it's overemphasis on skills kind of obfuscates what outcome you're actually trying to shoot for. And I kind of think of it like, it's like if you're trying to plan a trip somewhere, you know, like knowing what your end goal is tells you if you need to pack like a snowboard or a surfboard. But if you're preparing for all eventualities without knowing where you're going, you're just never going to leave the house in the first place, because you're like, oh, do I need a surfboard and a snowboard and hiking boots and this and that and that? So really by kind of having that outcome mindset, you can kind of work backwards and see what skills you eventually need to grab along the way. And I think as a company supporting that so that it supports both the individual as well as what the company gets out of it is a win-win for both. And so, you know, cross-functional projects, having that emphasis on adaptability over necessarily specific skills is kind of a nice way to go. And, you know, just experimenting, because it's that last part is important regardless of how you implement either the cross-functional or that notion of fostering adaptability, because if you don't leave room for that experimentation, you're not leaving room for a controlled environment where people can learn those skills. It's not very realistic to expect a cross-functional team, just throw them in there and, you know, expect perfect results. There will be a learning curve. I think you come out stronger out of it long-term, but on the condition that you leave some room for controlled experimentation, meaning it's okay to let people fail as long as they learn and learn in a way that fosters sort of that end picture that you're shooting for.
So a lot of good points that you mentioned, Michael. And I think I wanted to add on top of that, when you put your employees in these newer projects and they find themselves in an area that is unfamiliar to them, you definitely do want to provide that. You want to close that loop by also providing them with other employees and who can kind of act like mentors to these people. Make sure that you're setting your team up, the newer folks on the team, make sure you're setting them up for success and you're not just throwing them off into the deep end and just expecting them to kind of figure everything out on their own. And I'm not saying that as if we would do that, but I could totally see how some companies may be inclined to just do that, where they would just, maybe they take the initial, the effort to try to put their employees in that environment that promotes learning, but that's all they do. And they don't actually try to sit in and check in with them and make sure that the employees are doing what the company wants them to be doing, and not end up feeling like they got cheated by the company, or maybe getting burnt out along the way as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting balance when it comes to like transfer of knowledge per se, because to some extent you probably do want to give flexibility for people to figure it out on their own, at least to some extent, right? Because it is part of the learning experience and how you can have just a higher level of learning that happens. But if you have the luxury of having resources and knowledge that's already there, I mean, it can easily slip into reinventing the wheel a lot too. And so there is a happy medium where if your transfer of knowledge is, you know, some person is trying to learn expertise A and some expert in expertise A is just, you know, just regurgitating whatever they already know, you haven't really made progress as a company on the innovation side. So both extremes are probably not great, where one is completely left alone to their own devices, you know, just learning from scratch versus, you know, learning verbatim what someone else did. And so there's probably a happy medium where, like you said, mentorship plays a role in sort of solving that, where you are able to transfer knowledge, but also at the same time have enough distance where you can say, hey, this time around, should we do anything differently, right? Kind of like staying aware and being able to look at that environment. What conditions changed between now and then, such that, that skill of expertise needs to be modified or tailored in XYZ way in order to fit the new situation.
I think you sort of hinted at this, Jonathan, when you were asking us the questions in this order. I think the way to address stagnation is like a two-way street where the individual and the company, they have to meet each other halfway here, where the individual one has to have a certain level of risk tolerance where they're able to step outside their comfort zone and just have an open mind and have that maturity to be able to understand that they don't know everything that there is to know about something, and then they're just being able to receive feedback from other people and learn new things without letting their pride or ego getting in the way. So that's for the individual. And then for the company, you have to create that environment and create opportunities in which those individuals who have the personality in check to receive, to be able to continue growing, those companies have to be able to create that opportunity for the individual to capitalize on that. You can't have one or without the other and expect stagnation to be eliminated.
Yeah, I think that's where the cross-functional teams, for example, help with that. Because, like, say you've been an expert for a while at XYZ company, other than your own skill set, the company behavior that surrounds that, right? It's also probably that time in your career where someone's like, well, Joe's got this. They've been doing it for a while. They know how to manage a contract. So we're just going to let Joe handle it. And they kind of stop challenging Joe. They're like, okay, he knows what to do. We're just going to let them handle that. And then, you don't really force them out of their shell either. You're not really creating that push for them to learn something new, because as a company, you probably tend to think, okay, well, they're offloading something off my plate by knowing how to do it. So I just need them to keep doing that thing they're good at. And you're not necessarily thinking of their own betterment. You're just like, we got a ton of contracts and, just to pick this like hypothetical Joe, they're like, well, Joe's good at it. So, why put Joe somewhere else where he's going to learn, but then it's going to take time away from stuff that he's helping us out with.
Yeah.
But the problem is if Joe's stagnating and eventually changing companies, well, you pay for it and, well, lost time to transfer knowledge to the new person that comes in afterwards, time to find, say, Jane, if it's the replacement, that might take a few months. So it's one of those trade-offs where you need to have kind of like that foresight we've been talking about where, yes, if you put Joe in a cross-functional team, they're going to do other stuff, but it can also pay off maybe by learning or having been exposed to other things. And Joe can now, tie some parallels that they wouldn't have seen otherwise and be even better at what they were doing before.
I think this definitely kind of rings a bell in my head when we talked about in prior episodes about delegating tasks to individuals, where normally you would offload your work as a manager to someone in your team that is good at something. But like what you're saying, Michael, I didn't think about it in that way. But like if you just delegate something to someone because they're good at something, that might, what you just said just earlier, could end up being an unintentional consequence of that, where they just do that one thing that they're good at, but you're not giving them the opportunity to try something immediately outside of what you've been assigning to them for like years on end. So
yeah, you can end up essentially pigeonholing someone into a given task. And now, it depends on the importance of the task. I think that's kind of the counterbalance to that. Like if you have things that are really important, certainly give them to people who you can entrust with that responsibility. But if, oftentimes you have tasks that are a little lower stakes, that those could be an opportunity to give those tasks, lower stake tasks, to people that may not have the same level of expertise, so that you can kind of train people in those, see if it's something they like. And again, usually by having that mastery of multiple domains, you're able to, usually come out better for it.
No, I would agree for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's tempting as a company to want everyone to have one specific role that they're really good at and then just delegate the work, in the most efficient way possible. But I think that mentality may also be leading to kind of the trend where people are switching companies more often.
Yeah.
Both for promotions, but also maybe for more variety of work.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that feeling of being able to build new skills.
Yeah, that's how you feel, that sort of career progression kind of feeling where you might be able to reinvent yourself. And to your point, like oftentimes you have to leave a company entirely to be able to reinvent. Because, I think for a lot of people, boxes are nice and comforting. And if you fit within the box, you tend to think of that person as that's the one thing they can do. And it's like hard to overcome that inertia of being, hey, that person can also do this other thing, right? So really as a company, if you don't foster that environment that it's okay for people to be across multiple fields of work, or if you don't facilitate those transitions, you're just going to have that inertia to overcome of like, once you do that one thing, it's like being in high school or something, you mess up once and whatever you messed up on is your reputation for the rest of it. Good luck on doing that.
Well, I think this has been a good discussion about stagnation and kind of how it affects working professionals and what we can do to avoid it, both as individuals and as a company. And with that, I think we should jump into our next segment, Thanks Mom, where we ask ChatGPT for 2 words that we can create a business idea out of. Hopefully. Let's see what we get today.
You just want to take a guess at what you think Mom will give us?
I've given up a long time ago. I hope it's no echo. I feel like we've had echo a bunch of times.
Maybe it's related to VHS. Maybe we'll get like steel VHS.
That would be funny, actually.
That would be very interesting. Steel vinyl. Here we go. It's loading. Magnet tapestry.
Ah, this.
I feel like we could work with that.
Yeah, it immediately lends itself to like the Etch-a-Sketch boards.
My brain was going down like, you know how you have just the tool organizers, but like just the like how you have the magnetic knife holders in the kitchen, just that, but for tools, like a giant tapestry like on a wall, and then just have all your tools, just like leave them hanging there and just kind of go touch them.
Because what I was thinking about are those sort of art pieces where you have like a magnetic backboard where you can change the magnetism, and based on the magnetism you can see like iron filings like show the magnetic fields, and you can use it to draw things.
Oh, that could be cool.
I was thinking something along like that, but instead of like iron filings, you use like ferrofluid, even where you just have like it's essentially a really thin tank of ferrofluid, but then you can manipulate the magnetic field in it, and then you could create maybe like a rippling effect, purely aesthetic thing. But if you're like a high-tech office and you want to look different from everyone else, and you want to have a really cool looking lobby, maybe you get something like that. It could be just a one and done art piece thing you recruit an artist for, but that's the first thing that came into my mind. Have like a flowing ferrofluid wall, kind of leaning to the tapestry part, like it's a curtain.
That would make for some cool, cool office decor
Maybe
too.
you could sort of split the difference between what Michael was thinking of and between kind of like the magnetic backboard, where you have some sort of like board that's magnetic for tools, but it's able to move the tools around and either like retrieve one that you want or pack them so that they fit nicely together. And that way you have like space for more tools than you would have otherwise.
See, that makes way more sense than what I was thinking just now.
What were you thinking?
Which was I was combining, when you said bridge the two, I was like, with the ferromagnets? And I was thinking like you put your tool and you're like, where's my hammer? And then there's like a giant arrow that appears. I'm like, it's here.
That's funny. It's the whole map.
Yeah. It's like, where did I put this tool? He's like, right there. A giant circle appears. Like,
honestly, would be helpful. But
I think the whole thing that self-Tetrises your tool back in place would probably have a better use case.
I'd be a little bit concerned though, if it's like, using electromagnets, like if the power goes out, all your tools fall off the wall. Oh dear. You get hit by a hammer, especially if you have like a chainsaw or like, a hammer.
True.
Some tools are dangerous. I don't want them like being held actively up in the air.
Yeah. You'd have, you could have those be permanent magnets, but then your energy cost for switching something around would just, you'd have a nice...
Yeah, because you'd need a mechanical system to move the magnets around.
Yeah. That's
It could be just a conveyor belt with magnets. That way, it doesn't rearrange them perfectly, but it just has like a circular track.
Like little, it's like call it a motorized pad that kind of moves around. It's like those games you have where it's like you have or sometimes you'll see it in dog toys too. It's like you have a square, they're filled with many smaller squares, but you're missing one, and that allows it to kind of shift around. You can
something like that.
So you can like reorient things.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I was thinking it's a completely different idea, but like this magnet tapestry could be like a cool name for some sort of space mission where you just mapping the magnetic field of some planetary body. Maybe it's just a really big planet, or it could be just like a solar system if you could somehow map that. But I was just trying to think of a different idea.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of merit for knowing the magnetic field of a planetary body too, other than the science of it too. Even if you're, able to, you could use it for navigation purposes in an area or planet where you don't have GPS. That's pretty important because on Earth we think of navigation, but you do have a lot of supporting infrastructure. And if you're going to say Mars, for example, you don't really have that. So,
right.
You could do it visually, looking at pictures you've collected from satellites, or it could be magnetically.
Yeah, but some planets don't really have a strong magnetic field or anything.
That's true.
Trying to jog my brain if there's any other. Come up with more ideas.
Magnetic tapestry. Now I'm just thinking of like fishing nets with magnets. It's like one step more evolved than like the counter UAV measures. You're just like throw a net, but they're magnetic on top of being a net, I guess.
That way, I guess it sticks better or...
Still ponder the advantage a little bit, I guess. Can you like...
Because I think if you hit something with a net, like the magnet or not magnet is...
Here's an idea. I want to sit with that magnetic fishing net for a second. Maybe you can use that to pick up trash from the ground, like a lot of metal junk, maybe shipwrecks, stuff that sank to the bottom of the ocean. Use like a magnetic net or something that can just like, what's the right word? dredge the ocean floor, and then you can maybe clean up ocean like that. The only problem with that would be if it's literally dragging against the ocean floor, you could damage coral and a lot of wildlife. That's like the issue. So maybe
the idea is that it goes just above the ocean floor. You wouldn't be able to pick up plastic, but you could maybe get like metal trash.
Yeah. It could just be
let it hover and let the magnets pick up
without disrupting the ocean floor as much.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd be dislodging objects, but
yeah, and I'm thinking of those nodules on the bottom floor, like for
like iron.
Yeah, or for like rare earth metal extraction. You know, it's a like sort of the controversial aspect of mining seabeds as well. Yeah, you know, maybe that's a more delicate way to pick him up too.
That is true.
The problem is they're still part of the ecosystem in terms of the sort of carbon and oxygen life cycle. So that doesn't solve that problem, but at least you can pick him up a little less.
Well, I was gonna say if there is an area in the ocean where there is like pretty much no life, like there's a lot of parts in the ocean where it's just sand, like not a lot of stuff going on there. I wonder if it is just more economical and more environmentally responsible for us to just kind of have a magnet kind of just peruse above the ocean surface and just pick up whatever rare earth minerals kind of come out through the sand rather than having a more intrusive method of just mining and making holes all over the ocean floor.
Oh
you could just have like multiple paths, like some passes. Yeah, with a magnet like that.
No, to your point, the current methods are extremely damaging. But beyond the wild, I mean, that would solve the wildlife problem. But I think the other aspect is that they're important for water splitting, right? Which we kind of need for oxygen as well. And ocean plays a big role in carbon sequestration as well. And so that's part of that life cycle as well. So by removing the nodules, you're kind of interfering with something we desperately need on the sort of the in situ resource utilization side of things. So.
This might get a little dark, but when we mentioned iron, I was thinking about the iron in your blood. I was wondering if there's anything you can do with your blood, like healthcare thing.
This going dark.
I was wondering if there's some sort of healthcare thing you can do.
Is that like an MRI, like magnetic resonance imager,
or maybe you could measure the contents. This technology that is just so happened to be called magnet tapestry could somehow identify the composition of your blood. Maybe you have too little iron. Maybe
1 in 3 Americans are deficient in iron.
So I've heard that. Wow. Where's the magnetic carpet when you need it?
Magnetic tapestry. It's just a piece of metal you can eat.
So you're eating metallic carpets.
I'm thinking it's like a blanket that you just put on top of yourself before you go to bed, and the blanket just measures the iron concentration across your entire body. It's a silly idea. It's just I don't know. I'm trying to connect the tapestry.
To have like
some
be
sort
like an
of
actual
curtain.
sheet.
That's what I don't know what my brain just immediately goes to something like that.
Nah.
I'm trying to think of how that would work from like a non-intrusive sort of medical imaging and or sensing point of view, you know. Like imagine it'd be like you have something in a hospital that, you know, you throw over a patient, or I'm trying to think if you'd have a need to have it at home to like monitor on a daily basis.
Trying to figure out.
You maybe use magnetism for like a similar application for ground penetrating radar. Maybe you can find ferromagnetic materials somehow by looking at the way the magnetic field changes. Or maybe that is just what radar is. No, not exactly.
Well, it's more of a reflectivity argument, but you do have quantum magnetometers and other sort of magnetometers that kind of look at that essentially, like shifts in gravity field as well, which has interesting applications because we were talking about GPS denied environments too. Like if you're underground, for example, like in theory, in tunnels, you should be able to sense things, or underwater through magnetic field. Now, the issue is what resolution do you have on that magnetometer?
How much energy do you need to create the magnetic field?
Yeah, and how often does the Earth's field change so that you can have reliable navigation purposes as well? Like how often do you need to remap or update your belief on?
You need to be very precise with your measurements.
Yeah, so that's where the quantum
noise too, especially if you're from your own electronics.
Exactly. But that'd be a magnetic application. Take many of them and they're like a carpet. It's like the weave or a tapestry. It's the weave of many of them together.
Could be.
So. I see Eugene having an idea over there.
I had a silly idea. It might be a little weird. Magnet, I'm thinking because I'm thinking about magnet more metaphorically, but like bottom line, I was thinking about a blanket that a couple could share in bed, where you have a magnet
large blanket
attracting two bodies together, and you have a tapestry as a blanket. I don't know. For some reason, I really like it.
It could be one of those
blanket.
You know how people have those weighted blankets? It could be a blanket that sort of like wants to adhere to itself.
Yeah.
And maybe that would be more comforting than just a regular blanket because it like kind of wraps more tightly automatically.
Oh, like a better sleeping bag even.
Exactly.
Ooh,
And
the ultimate snuggie.
you don't actually have to
Yeah.
climb inside. You just like toss it over yourself, and then it kind of like
Like
has some sort of like
That might be-
mutual self-attraction. It just like, yeah.
That might be really useful if you're in the Arctic or somewhere where you're trying to contain as much
helps
body
conserve
warmth to
heat.
yourself.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, something that sort of self zips or something like that. I'm just picturing like a blanket that has like let's say all along the sides like different magnets so it can like on itself.
Or you could even
close.
just roll it over into like a burrito and like it'll stay put better. You know, even if like you're shifting around or you like roll, you know, like you can obviously just like push it off super easily, but
Yeah. No, there could be something for that. Because, I mean, you maybe have some applications where you want to be bundled up, but like easy in and out too, where maybe that sort of magnetic latching could
Yeah,
make it a
'cause-
little easier.
exactly, because you can just like throw it off.
Yeah.
I can imagine this being a really handy storage kind of device where it's just like a tarp that could just wrap itself. So you just dump whatever you need inside the tarp and have the tarp just wrap itself up and you just carry the whole thing with you.
Yeah,
on
it
the
could
back of
have
a truck
some
or something.
maybe permanent magnets at the edge, but maybe like electromagnets that allow it to self-roll, or another mechanism that allows it to roll itself up. And then once it rolls up, the magnets keep it held together passively.
Yeah.
That could be useful. Especially if it can overcome a decent amount of force of just random
Yeah.
objects thrown on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like knapsacking something, kind of rolling it up in a bag.
Mm-hmm.
Or we can still stay on the topic of magnetic attraction, just have really nice tapestries.
Yeah, that's an option.
It's hard to get my head outside of the immediate physical
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking
aspects
like
of magnet and a tapestry.
tapestry of weaving things together. That could be knowledge, for example.
Mm.
That could be connections, like networking, for example.
Oh.
Trying to go metaphorical on the tapestry now.
Yeah.
LinkedIn, but no AI.
LinkedIn, but no AI. Trying to see where the magnetism.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
LinkedIn only for people who have specific expertise in magnetics. Totally not going to hit stagnation with that
Yeah.
one. Yeah, something along those lines of connections, but the magnetic part is
Trying to just
throwing
think
it
of
off a
like,
little bit.
trying to generalize it a bit more, just anything with an attractive force, anything that attracts things with each other.
Well, see, yeah. So actually, that's a good one. If you go for attractive force and then you go for connections, that could be essentially like a sort of a deal flow website or a deal making website. Maybe you can have one. I'm trying to think of like who loves a good deal flow. Like venture capitalists probably would like a nice platform where you can like have sort of a community approach to deal sharing.
Yeah.
Or a lot of those platforms that, you know, some already do that, like in a specific field, might already be looking at pooling different sets of expertise. I know it might be like works for your house or other like plumbers or I don't know, it could be like
No, but
specific skill set.
that's an interesting way to approach it.
Like a marketplace.
Because both the tapestry and the magnetic part all have to do with bringing things together and weaving them together.
Yeah, like some marketplace of sorts, maybe bringing in like some kind of knowledge.
Yeah.
I guess with the tapestry, I'm thinking of like something that's tightly woven, so maybe like highly interconnected, as opposed to like as opposed to a fully random marketplace like Amazon or eBay or something like that. Like have something that's maybe specialized, I guess is what comes to mind for like maybe a certain skill. That could be like a place where you have contractors and contracts that both, you know, like need, you know, just facilitate how they connect. But like again, kind of more of that.
Kind of like Fiverr a little bit.
Yeah, except Fiverr is probably like generalized in the sense you can have any kind of skill on there. I'm thinking like maybe essentially a very similar concept, but with maybe like a specific field in mind, or a specific maybe I should say a sector in mind. You know, that's why I'm thinking VC, for example, where it's like startups and VCs on like some kind of common platform. Like rather than go and pitch to 20 VCs, you go pitch on that platform, and then like all VCs can kind of see it or something like that. Yeah, some VC platform, I think that could be interesting. Kind of. I mean, like, I don't know, from the startup side, the idea of going to pitch to like 20 different VCs is kind of annoying. And then I'm pretty sure on the VC side, having a million different pitches is also kind of annoying. So maybe some kind of platform that regroups it could actually be of interest to someone. Someone out there, please do this so that we don't
Make life
have
easier
to go pitch
for
anytime.
the rest of us. Okay, I think that's a good discussion of what the magnetic tapestry may look like.
Yeah.
And let us know in the comments, or just message us if you have any ideas about where you would have gone for either the magnetic tapestry or for the question of the day. And yeah, thank you for listening, and have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.